Gotta talk Lions. Hey, TLB, word to Broder, man. It's
Talk
time
Lions,
to
bitch.
talk Lions. And you know what? We can't even just sit here and continue to glaze and just wax poetically about the victory, because we got to talk about Aiden Hutchinson and where the Detroit Lions go from here. And in this segment, we got to talk about there's a lot of different options here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. And GM Flannel is going to, front office Flannel, is going to take us through a couple different scenarios over a couple different segments. The crew's going to break it down. We want you guys engaged as well. But we got to start with the big dogs. And people keep saying, just stop talking about Max Crosby. He's never going to come here. Okay, sure. But then you got people like Dan Orlovsky, people on other NFL, people within the NFL world saying, you know what? Max Crosby to the Lions, all in. Make it happen right now. They're the best team in the NFC.
Dan Orlovsky even said that if you have to give up a first, if you have to give up a second, go ahead. Go ahead and do it.
Pick.
Dan Orlovsky also ran out the back of the end zone.
That's fine.
True. And he didn't say two first. I just want to
Chase.
state for the record, he didn't say two first. He
just
said
said-
a first and a second.
I am
So
so
say first and a second.
I am so glad.
Don't discourage this.
I was about to say, well, Chase is going to discourage it because he's a wet blanket. But you know what? We'll get Chase's opinion after I present it all, because I think it's valuable to have all of that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the potential, maybe one first instead of two, because there are some scenarios that were posted on the Woodward Sports social medias, and for these couple of guys who the Lions could potentially add at some point during the season to offset the injury to Aiden Hutchinson, these are guys that can step in and be just as good as Aiden Hutchinson already was, or even better. These are some of the best edge rushers in the NFL. And the first trade scenario I want to present is the Max Crosby one, if you've got that, JB.
Oh, yeah.
The Max Crosby one. So it says, who says no? The Lions would receive Max Crosby, a 2025 sixth-round pick, and the Raiders would receive a 2025, fifth-round pick or first-round pick, 2026 first round, 2026 fourth round, and James Houston. The question is not just, would you take this? The question is also, I've got another one to throw at you. Take this entire trade scenario and make it the same, but instead of Max Crosby, Myles Garrett. Because I'll tell you what, the Cleveland Browns are a dumpster fire right now.
Yeah.
They are stuck with Deshaun Watson's horrific contract because it is fully guaranteed. There is nothing that they can do to get out of it, even if they cut him. So they're kind of in a position where they could have maybe, with all things equal, the best football player on planet Earth, maybe the best defensive player on planet Earth, and it doesn't mean a damn thing. So if I were Brad Holmes, I would probably go after Myles Garrett instead of Max Crosby. And I want to get everybody in the room's opinion as well, but I want to present why at first. And it's not just me saying it. You saw Matt Broder mention it on Woodward and Maine, and you saw even Mike Valeni mention it on 97.1. So I thought it was relevant. And here's why I think Myles Garrett is actually more gettable than Max Crosby. Myles Garrett, quiet as kept, is one of the biggest bargains in the National Football League right now. He's about a $20 million cap hit for the next 3 seasons if you count this year, 2025 and 2026. Did you know that in 2024, Max Crosby is the highest cap hit amongst edge rushers? Myles Garrett is 8th. In 2025, Myles Garrett is the 19th biggest cap hit amongst edge rushers. Max Crosby is 7th. In 2026, Myles Garrett is 13th amongst edge rushers and cap hit, and Max Crosby is 9th. So we might have been looking at the wrong guy all along. Myles Garrett was Defensive Player of the Year last season, and he is one of the greatest bargains in the National Football League. If you wanted me to give one beef with the trade, I would probably say a 2025 second and a 2026 first. That's probably what I would give up, because 2 firsts is a steep price. However, if you're Cleveland, and I'll even include Las Vegas when it comes to Max Crosby, because Max Crosby would be an upgrade as well, most certainly. If you're those teams, that might be what it takes for you to get rid of your best player. So I want to ask around the room. I'll start with you, Kool-Aid. If you had to choose, would you say Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, or neither? And you can also give the answer of, I would change some things about the deal.
I feel like for this segment, especially since we're going through a couple different other scenarios, we'll just keep it at either or. You know what I mean? And we'll keep the neithers for later on.
Sure.
This is if you're talking about replacing an Aiden Hutchinson, neither one of these options are bad options. But you presented effectively think with my heart or think with my head.
Okay.
And that's where I think a lot of people are. When they think Max Crosby, they think the hometown guy that they have been fantasizing about being in a Detroit Lions uniform for a couple years now, before there was a necessity or a need. We understand what happened in the offseason. And though I would like it to happen, when we talk about the business of it all plus the impact, Myles Garrett just sounds like the more logical answer.
I mean, the Browns, like I said, they're a dumpster fire, and Myles Garrett, it's actually, I'm actually shocked at this point that he hasn't asked for a new deal, because he can easily stake claim to being the best defensive player, period, in the NFL. And in 2025, he has the 19th highest cap hit amongst edge rushers. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about how he is a steal at this point. And by the way, just so I have to point this out as well, the Lions have $34 million in cap space currently. KG.
Yeah.
Which one of those moves sounds more enticing to you, if any? You can definitely say neither, and you can definitely change some things about the deal if you would like I did, for example.
Yeah, both deals appeal to me. I feel like you can get Myles Garrett for cheaper because of what Cleveland has to deal with. I mean, they got that Deshaun Watson contract, so they have to cut bait somewhere because they're not going to be able to get rid of him anytime soon. So I think they're in a more compromising position than the Las Vegas Raiders, because the Raiders can easily just say, hey, we're not trading anybody. We're going to try to retool this thing, and they would have all rights to do so. But I don't know, man. I think I'm going Myles Garrett, and I would take maybe one of those first-round picks out. I think you can get that deal done without that next year's first. If I give them this year's first, that fourth-rounder, and James Houston, I feel like that's serviceable enough. Maybe even Hendon Hooker if y'all want to explore that, and maybe try to, look out for your future, because they're going to need to eventually. But I probably would go with that deal, but I'm not necessarily mad at the Max Crosby deal either, because if he wants to be here, and by all accounts, he seems like somebody that would love to be in this organization and be here long term, maybe I would risk that capital to go get somebody like that.
I'll tell you what, if you can do a first, a fourth, and James Houston, you make that deal for either.
Oh, absolutely.
Like cap hit be damned, because don't get me wrong, Max Crosby would be phenomenal, and he's worth the money that he's paid. It's just if you could get Myles Garrett at $20 million cap hits for the next 3 seasons, only having to give up one first, a fourth, and James Houston, it would be, I think, highway robbery. Yeah. Which I think is one of the reasons why our social team posted that, where they give up 2 firsts. And I gave the scenario of maybe a 2025 second and a 2026 first, along with the fourth and James Houston. But KG, Brad Holmes, man, he's a shrewd businessman, and if he can get that done, I like that deal even better than the one that I presented.
Yeah, he wheels and deals, and like you said, I would maybe, instead of a fourth, I'll give you a next year second or something like that. We can explore that, but I just don't want to give up 2 firsts in that particular deal, because I feel like you can get it done for cheaper.
Ooh, a 20. Now we're the wheels are spinning, because we're talking about maybe a 2026, a 2026 first, a 2025 second, no fourth. James Houston.
Hey,
I don't hate it. Although at this point, James Houston is kind of the equivalent of a pack of Skittles right now. I hate
Hooker.
And that was a sidebar mission, sidebar GTA quest that I wanted to ask the chat family. Are you guys 100% done with James Houston?
I don't know if I'm necessarily 100% done, because you need him to step up in some capacity. But as a trade piece, what is he even worth at this point?
Yeah, he's an expiring contract. We got to look at that. And if he ain't proved nothing through 6 games, I don't know if we're going to see him a lot, the rest of the way down the line. So, I mean, at this point, anything's on the table. I mean, you got to make these type of drastic moves when you're in a Super Bowl window like this.
Yes, and I want to be clear. This is something that could happen. I'm not even saying it's got to happen tomorrow. This could play out to where Cleveland is, 1-7, 1-8 even. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, and maybe Las Vegas loses a couple of games. This is just something to think about as the time moves on, especially if you see the Lions clearly struggle and miss Aiden Hutchinson, which is also very possible. We have to be realistic. Yep. But Chase, I want to ask you this question. Are you thinking the Myles Garrett deal, the Max Crosby deal, neither, or I'll make a deal with one of them, I just change some things?
Between the two, I'd rather have Myles Garrett. I think
Okay.
he's the better player, and I think he's the better value. I think people are more in love with the story of Max Crosby, but if we want to win, and that's what I care about is winning, I'd rather have Myles Garrett. He's a number 1 ranked high school recruit, number 1 overall pick out of the draft. He's just a quiet killer. Dude is a beast. He's a physical specimen.
Yeah.
So
Is it weird that I almost feel like he's become underrated?
I know
It's crazy. And he's coming off of two
He's almost
16-sack years and a 14-sack season.
I was
as
say, he's
well.
almost in that TJ Watt category where it's like you just know how good they are. It's like an
Yeah.
expectation. When they hit that 16 sack total, you're almost like, did they underperform a little bit? They should have been closer to 18 and a half.
And of course, and of course, I'm not saying that you do that, and that thinking is absurd. But I get it.
Agreed. Yeah, we're in line with that. Yeah.
I mean, Myles Garrett was Defensive Player of the Year last year, but I agree.
Yeah.
I said at the beginning, and I don't think that this is crazy talk. You know, in my opinion, Patrick Mahomes is the best player in football, but Myles Garrett has a claim to that throne. He has an argument. He can at least make the argument.
Now, just to push back a little bit, Myles Garrett has been somebody that has always had somebody opposite of him. So not to say that he's not that player, that we've seen put up, all these crazy stats, but he's coming into a different situation if he comes here. He's not going to have that dominant presence on the other side as well. Do you think that maybe affects his production at all?
I mean, who was the other dominant presence you thought he played with?
Well, I mean, he had Darius Smith.
That's he hasn't had him the whole time. I think he just signed with the Browns this year.
Yeah, did he play with Clowney before too?
I think for a year or two, but not his whole career.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, better than anything we're producing. We're talking
People
like
were
Josh
dogging
Haskell,
Clowney yesterday.
Yeah, well, I wasn't, but that's sorry. But I would say that what if he kind of has to do what Hutchinson did last year?
Yeah.
What if he's a guy that just is a constant disruptor, but maybe doesn't get the amount of sacks that you like, but still can give you, 8 in the next 12 games if they were to sign him now, but kind of obviously prorate that to however many games. He's the one. He's not the bookend. He is the superstar.
Yeah.
To me, there would be no drop off from Aiden Hutchinson.
I think it'd actually be an improvement. Maybe not based on this year's stats, but if you're looking at their career, arguably he is a better player than Hutch was having a better year, but Garrett was the better player.
Myles Garrett, right now, he is the better player. It's just the only reason I say the same is because different systems. He's got to learn some things. But Myles Garrett's just one of those guys you plug in, and he's going to be dominant from day one because that's what he's been his entire career. You said it. High school, the best recruit. College, number 1 overall pick. Now he's arguably the best defensive player in the NFL. And I want to get to JB before we go to break. And right now we're just talking about the big dogs. I see a lot of other scenarios in the chat. We will get to them because they don't necessarily have to do something like this. But JB, if we're talking about a deal to be made, would you go Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, neither, or would you make some changes to the terms of the deal that Woodward Sports Socials posted?
I mean, honestly, I got to go with either one. I would be happy with, just being honest. But if we're being real, and if the Lions actually presented that trade to the Raiders, I guarantee you they're probably turning that down. I'm just saying.
What?
I think they're turning it down just because they know what position the Lions are in. They're going to want a lot more.
How much more can you get? You got 2 first.
They want everything that they can. And I'm telling you right now, the easier grab would be a Myles Garrett just because he's aging and the Browns need to figure out what they're trying to do on their side as well, too. Now, if the Raiders actually really do want to give up Max Crosby, then maybe we might have to take on a Devontae Adams contract as well, too, to kind of help them out as well. So if that might kind of be in the works as well, but an easier, simple grab would just be Myles Garrett. But if Brad Holmes can swindle this somehow, some way, I would be happy with either or.
I think the reason why he can is because they're not desperate, and I know we're going to talk about that, and they do got options, which changes a little bit of what the Raiders can or can't do. If there wasn't a Myles Garrett out there, if there wasn't Hendrickson out there, if there wasn't some other potential options out there, then I do believe that the Raiders would have a little bit more leverage. In the summer, they had a whole lot more leverage. At this point right now where you can see, you know what, the Raiders ain't really that.
Yeah.
And where you're going from here, and this is your biggest potential chip to try and catapult your rebuild forward, I don't know. I don't know if they necessarily have the guns right now to kind of hold their place like that.
And the thing is, too, if you're the Raiders, if you're the Browns, obviously you love having Max Crosby and Myles Garrett, respectively. But what you want to do most is win. And I think right now, as currently constructed with these teams, with the front offices, with just how poorly, like how much of a disaster and dysfunction there is surrounding those teams, they can have those guys and they're still not going to win anything. And that's a reality that a lot of franchises have to look themselves in the mirror and realize. And I think, JB, that's where me and you disagree, that 2 first rounds.
Right.
That, to me, is what it might take the Raiders.
I'm hanging up the phone if they want more than that. We might as well not even talk.
No, and that's fine. We'll see how it all
Right.
plays
Let
out.
your franchise burn down, Davis. I'm good.
But I'm actually, as me and you kind of agreed upon, maybe trying to get a little bit better of a deal. But to me, to kind of put a bow on all of this, if it's Myles Garrett, I'm probably giving up 2 first-round picks because I think this year, and the reason I'm mentioning this scenario right now is because these are the big dogs. This is actually talking about potentially mortgaging your future. So I have to put this scenario out there. Something catastrophic happened to the Lions team this year. Aiden Hutchinson was one of the guys that you can't lose and replace. You just can't, unless you do something like this, but we'll see if they're willing to do that. You never know what it might be next year because it is the NFL. Injuries happen. This year, if they lose Aiden Hutchinson and don't replace him and they don't win the Super Bowl, obviously you can look at it as, oh yeah, Aiden Hutchinson's out. It's a reason, not an excuse. He's going to come back and they're going to go at it again in 2025. What if next year it's Goff? What if next year it's Panay? What if next year it's Amon-Ra? What if next year it's Laporta? What if next year it's Branch? What if next year it's Kirby, who's proven to be a difference maker himself? That's why, even if it goes to giving up 2 first-round picks, if it's Myles Garrett in particular, even if it's Max Crosby, I'm probably doing it. Does it make me reckless? Maybe. But what I saw on that football field on Sunday afternoon, before Aiden Hutchinson went out, was the best team in the NFL. Not the Chiefs.
Then it doesn't make it reckless if you go after a player that you believe can help you punch that ticket this season. That's what this season was about. It was about the Super Bowl. They said that immediately after the 49ers game. They said that. They said that all offseason. They said that, from the coaches to the front office to the players. You have to keep that in rhythm. Ultimately, we're all going to have the ways that we think this thing should go down. We're going to talk about more of those. But I am grateful that if you're going to find yourself in this type of adversity, in this type of situation, that it's with the character and the makeup of the guys that Brad Holmes has identified, Dan Campbell has coached up, and the fact that the leaders of this team and of this organization, those are the right types of guys that if you're going to have to go through adversity and still succeed and still have that mindset, I'm glad it's these Detroit Lions.
Oh, sure. And that's 100% fair. And for those of you who think that the price was a little bit too steep, who maybe want to consider some lesser moves that you don't have to give up as much, but you maybe don't quite replace the production, I got you covered. Because I got a couple of different scenarios coming up that may be a little bit easier to stomach, although you might not quite replace Aiden's production.